I glanced at my watch, the luminous dial barely visible in the dimly lit bar. It was nearly closing time, but still no sign of Todd. Not that I was surprised. Punctuality was never his strong suit. A slight movement caught my eye, and I turned to see him sauntering in, that familiar arrogant smirk plastered across his face. "Marie," he drawled, sliding onto the bar stool next to me. "Long time no see. You're looking good, babe." His eyes raked over me in a way that made my skin crawl. I tensed, fingers tightening around my glass. "What do you want, Todd?" He feigned innocence. "What, a guy can't catch up with an old friend? An old friend? After what he'd done to me?" The memories came flooding back, and I felt the familiar sting of betrayal. But this time, I refused to be the victim. "We were never friends," I said coolly. "And you lost the right to call me babe a long time ago." Something flickered in his eyes, surprise, maybe even a hint of respect. Good. I wasn't the same naive girl he'd played all those years ago. "Ooh, someone's grown a backbone," another voice chimed in. Lindsay sidled up beside Todd, that same cruel glint in her eyes. So they were still together. How fitting. I took a deep breath, steadying myself. "You two really have some nerve showing your faces around me after what you put me through." Todd scoffed. "You're one to talk, Marie. Marrying someone else's child? A woman who's barren? How fitting. You can't pour love into a kid that isn't yours, right?" White-hot rage surged through me, and I opened my mouth to unleash the torrent of vitriol I'd been holding back for years. But a firm hand on my shoulder stopped me. I turned to see Ryan, his warm eyes filled with concern. "Everything okay, babe?" he asked, his voice a calming anchor amidst the storm. I swallowed hard, the anger still simmering beneath the surface. But one look at my husband and I felt a sense of peace wash over me. With him by my side, their words held no power. "Everything's fine," I said, rising from my stool. "In fact, it's better than fine. We were just leaving." Lindsay scoffed. "Running away again, I see. Typical Marie." But before I could respond, a new voice cut through the tension. "Mom? Dad? What's going on?" Liam emerged from the crowd, his brow furrowed in confusion. My beautiful, brilliant son. In that moment, I felt a surge of pride and defiance. How dare they try to belittle what we had? I wrapped an arm around Liam's shoulders, holding him close. "Don't worry, sweetheart. These people were just leaving." For a long moment, Todd and Lindsay simply stared, their mouths agape. Perhaps they'd expected me to crumble, to retreat back into my shell like I had all those years ago. But not this time. This time, I had everything they could never understand, a loving family, a life filled with purpose and joy. As we turned to leave, I caught one last glimpse of their stunned expressions. And in that moment, I knew I had won. I took a sip of my wine, trying to steady my nerves as the memories washed over me. It had been years since I'd thought about those dark days with Todd, but seeing him again had ripped the scab off that still raw wound. It started out like any other romance, I suppose. We met through mutual friends during my first year out of college, and there was an instant connection. Todd was charming, confident, successful, everything I thought I wanted in a partner. But the cracks soon began to show. "You're late again, Marie," he'd snap whenever I got held up at work. "Don't you care about this relationship at all?" Or he'd berate me for ordering the wrong dish at a restaurant, sneering, "You're lucky I love you, because no one else would put up with your crap." At first I brushed it off, telling myself he was just passionate, that I was overreacting. But his mood swings grew more erratic, his temper shorter. The man I'd fallen for was slowly being replaced by this volatile, controlling stranger. "Marie, darling, you're not even trying!" His mother's shrill voice cut through my reverie. "How do you expect to be a good wife if you can't even master a simple soufflé?" I flinched, fingers tightening around the whisk as egg whites splattered across the kitchen counter. Of course, Todd's mother, Eliza, had to chime in with her 2 cents. "I'm sorry. I'll start over," I mumbled, already reaching for a new bowl. "Don't bother," she snapped. "We both know you're hopeless in the kitchen, just like you're hopeless at everything else." The words stung, but I'd learned to bite my tongue around Eliza. Arguing only made things worse. A few nights later, I arrived home late from another hellish cooking lesson to find Todd lounging on the couch, beer in hand. He didn't even glance up as I walked in. "Hey, babe, you'll never guess who I ran into today," he began, a sly grin spreading across his face. "Lindsay. You remember her, right? My buddy from the office?" A knot formed in the pit of my stomach. Of course I remembered Lindsay, my supposed friend who'd been not so subtly flirting with Todd for months. She was telling me about this amazing new Thai place downtown, Todd continued, oblivious to my discomfort. We should totally check it out sometime, the three of us. I opened my mouth to protest, but the words died on my tongue. What was the point? He'd only accuse me of being jealous and irrational again. So I simply nodded, pastering on a fake smile as I felt my world crumbling around me. Little did I know, that was only the beginning. I drained the last sip of wine, letting the bitter taste linger on my tongue for a moment before setting the glass aside. Those memories were like a weight pressing down on my chest, but I couldn't dwell on the past anymore. Not when my present was so incredibly full. A warm smile spread across my face as I glanced around our cozy living room, the framed photos covering the walls, each one capturing a precious moment frozen in time. Ryan and I on our wedding day, beaming at each other like lovesick fools. Liam's first day of kindergarten, that adorable gap-toothed grin as he clutched his Superman lunchbox. So much had changed since those dark days with Todd. It still amazed me sometimes how far I'd come. I met Ryan at a tech conference in San Francisco, if you can believe it. I'd been giving a presentation on mobile marketing strategies, but my mind was a million miles away, still reeling from the implosion of my engagement. As everyone filtered out after the talk, I remained glued to my seat, staring blankly at my notes. You know, that was a pretty impressive presentation. I startled at the unexpected voice, glancing up to see a tall, lanky man with messy chestnut curls and a lopsided grin. Even disheveled in a rumpled button-down, there was an undeniable warmth about him that drew me in instantly. Oh, thanks, I stammered, heat creeping into my cheeks. Ryan. He stuck out a calloused hand. I'm the CTO over at AppCorp. Well, one of them anyway. Just like that, we were off and running, conversation flowing easily between us. Before I knew it, the conference hall was nearly empty, and the custodians were giving us the evil eye. We continued seeing each other after that, grabbing drinks or dinner whenever our schedules allowed. With Ryan, it was different, refreshingly different. He never made me feel inferior or inadequate. If anything, he seemed in awe of me, constantly praising my intelligence and ambition. You're one of the most driven women I've ever met, he'd murmur, planting a soft kiss on my forehead. Don't ever let anyone dull your shine, okay? We made our relationship official after just a few months of dating. Then, shortly after, Ryan dropped a bombshell. He wanted to look into adoption. Having kids had never really been a priority for me, not after the disaster with Todd. But one look into Ryan's hopeful eyes and I knew I couldn't say no. The moment they placed baby Liam in my arms, all the old fears and doubts melted away. This tiny human was mine to love and cherish. Biology be damned. I stroked his downy tufts of hair, marveling at how perfectly he fit against my chest, and in that instant I understood what Ryan had seen in me all along. Over the years, our little family only grew stronger. Ryan and I still bickered over silly things, of course, but never with the toxic vitriol that had poisoned my relationship with Todd. And Liam, well, that kid could brighten even the dreariest of days. Watching him grow into a whip-smart, hilarious, all-around amazing young man was the greatest privilege of my life. For the first time in what felt like forever, I was truly, utterly happy. My past with Todd and Lindsay was finally behind me, or so I thought. Mom, I'm heading out, Liam called from the front hallway. I glanced up from the sinkful of dishes to see him shrugging on his jacket. Where are you off to? I asked, drying my hands on a towel. He rolled his eyes good-naturedly. The mall, remember? Aiden and I are meeting up to work on that app we've been coding. Right, of course. Ever since Liam had discovered his knack for programming a few years back, he and his best friend Aiden were practically inseparable, always tinkering away on some new project. Well, don't work too hard, I teased, ruffling his shaggy brown hair. Try to have a little fun too, okay? Yeah, he mumbled, cheeks flushing as he batted my hand away. But I could see the hint of a smile playing at the corners of his mouth. I watched fondly as he hurried out the door. My baby boy, growing up into such an impressive young man right before my eyes. Ryan and I couldn't have been prouder of him if we tried. Speaking of Ryan, I heard the distant click of the garage door opening, followed by the familiar rumble of his car pulling into the driveway. A few moments later, he appeared in the kitchen doorway, briefcase in hand. "Hey, honey, I'm home," he announced with a weary smile. "Long day?" I crossed the room to greet him with a peck on the cheek. "You have no idea." He set his briefcase down with a heavy thud. "I swear, some of the idiots they hire over in product management wouldn't know good code if it hit them over the head." I skecked sympathetically, guiding him over to the kitchen table. "Well, you just relax for a bit. I'll grab you a beer." As I retrieved a cold bottle from the fridge, Ryan loosened his tie and let out a contented sigh. "You're the best wife a guy could ask for, you know that?" I felt my cheeks warm at the compliment, the same fluttery feeling blossoming in my chest that I'd felt all those years ago when we first met. Silly how even after over a decade of marriage, he could still make me swoon like a love-struck teenager. We spent the rest of the evening enjoying our usual weekend routine, watching terrible reality shows, ordering in greasy pizza, doing absolutely nothing of consequence, just being together the way it was meant to be. The next morning, I convinced Ryan to brave the Sunday mall crowds with me in pursuit of a new couch for the living room. "Ours is practically fossilized," I joked, dodging the crumbs and stray Cheeto dust littering the worn plaid upholstery. We wandered from store to store, bickering good-naturedly over fabric swatches and styles, until my stomach began rudely reminding me that I'd skipped breakfast. "Come on, let's grab a snack break over in the food court," Ryan suggested, already leading the way. I rolled my eyes but followed willingly. That's when I spotted them, like a punch to the gut, knocking the wind clear out of me. Todd and Lindsay, standing dead ahead. For a fraction of a second, I thought maybe I was imagining things, some sort of terrible waking nightmare. But no, there they were in the flesh, as smug and hateful as ever. Before I could process what was happening, they were making a beeline straight for us. My heart kicked into overdrive, palms slick with cold sweat. No, not again. I refused to be their victim a second time. Todd's cocky grin widened as he swaggered up to us, Lindsay hot on his heels. Well, if it isn't Marie and her little house husband," he sneered, giving Ryan an obvious once-over. I felt Ryan tense beside me, but he remained silent, jaw clenched tight. "Imagine running into you two losers here," Lindsay chimed in, her shrill voice like nails on a chalkboard. "Doing a little shopping for a new apartment, I assume? Must be getting cramped in that shoebox you call a home." The acid remarks hit their mark, a familiar sense of shame and inadequacy bubbling up inside me. All those years of being belittled and berated came rushing back in an instant. But this time, something was different. This time, I had Ryan. I opened my mouth to fire back a scathing retort, but Ryan beat me to it. "Actually, we're just browsing for new furniture," he said coolly, emanating a quiet confidence that seemed to throw Todd for a loop. "You know how it is. The more money you make, the more stuff you need to fill your home with." A flicker of uncertainty crossed Todd's face before the bravado returned full force. "Yeah, like some washed-up software engineers really raking it in," he scoffed. Oops, someone hadn't done their homework. I had to bite back a smirk as realization slowly dawned on Lindsay's face. "Wait, Ryan? As in Ryan Johnson? From AppCorp?" Her tone shifted, the venomous sneer morphing into something more akin to fear. "The one and only," Ryan confirmed with a cavalier smile. "But I'm sure you already knew that, right, Todd?" The silence that followed was deafening. If looks could kill, the daggers shooting from Todd's eyes would have struck me dead on the spot. I couldn't help it. A giggle of pure vindictive glee escaped my lips before I could stop it. Seeing that arrogant ass squirm, realizing he was the nobody now, was more delicious than I could have imagined. "You think this is funny?" Todd spat, rounding on me with balled fists. "Laughing it up like you're some sort of big shot now?" In that moment, my amusement evaporated, replaced by a simmering rage. How dare he try to intimidate me, to make me feel small and powerless after everything he'd done? No more. I was through being a victim. "That's enough," I snapped, squaring my shoulders and staring him dead in the eye. Never again would I let this pathetic bully make me question my worth. "We're not the ones who need to be laughed at," I continued, voice steady and firm. "Look at you two. Still acting like petty, insecure children after all these years. It's sad, really." Out of the corner of my eye, I saw a small crowd starting to form, with people not so subtly pulling out their phones to record the confrontation. Good. Let the whole world see how the mighty Todd had fallen. Meanwhile, I've built an incredible life for myself, I pressed on, unable to resist twisting the knife. A career I'm passionate about, an amazing husband who respects and supports me, and a son who makes me prouder every single day. I paused, letting the weight of those final words sink in as I watched the blood drain from their smug faces. Todd opened his mouth, no doubt to hurl another pathetic insult my way, but I didn't give him the chance. "Don't ever come near me or my family again," I said, low and even, "or I'll make sure everyone knows exactly the kind of sad, miserable people you really are." With that, I turned on my heel and strode away, head held high, leaving them to stew in their own bitter misery. Ryan fell into step beside me, his warm hand finding mine and giving it a proud squeeze. For so long, I'd been shackled by the fear and shame they'd burdened me with. But today, I'd finally broken free of those chains once and for all. The mall confrontation turned out to be just the beginning of Todd and Lindsay's downfall. Within a week, videos of our altercation had gone viral, sparking a firestorm of backlash against them online. Can you believe this? Ryan shook his head in disbelief, scrolling through yet another scathing article on his tablet. People are calling for Todd's job, saying his behavior was completely unacceptable for an executive at a major marketing firm. I peered over his shoulder at the blaring headline, "Unhinged Boss Caught in Cringeworthy Public Meltdown." Below was the now infamous video, watched and shared millions of times, capturing every vicious word and pathetic tantrum for all to see. A tiny pang of guilt wormed its way in, but I quickly squashed it. This was the bed Todd had made. Now he had to lie in it. Sure enough, within days, we got word that Todd had been fired, his career lying in smoldering ruins. And Lindsay, it seemed, was determined to go down with the sinking ship, staunchly defending her partner's horrendous behavior on every social media platform. The weeks that followed were almost comical in their awfulness. With no income and their reputations utterly destroyed, it wasn't long before the luxury condo and designer wardrobe were gone too. Every time I checked the news, there seemed to be another story about the dramatic implosion of their formerly glamorous lives. I tried to feel some sense of satisfaction at seeing my tormentors brought so low. But truthfully, watching two grown adults crumble into such pathetic, sniveling shells just made me feel sad, and more than a little uncomfortable. Their final indignity came about a month after the initial incident, when a wild-eyed Lindsay showed up unannounced at my office's front desk demanding to see me. "Marie, you have to help us," she pleaded, looking utterly deranged with her ratty hair and stained sweatpants. "We've got nothing left, no money, no home. Todd's talking about doing something crazy if we can't get back on our feet soon." I stared at her in stunned silence, unsure whether to laugh or call security. This woman who had once seemed to have it all together was now nothing more than a broken, blubbering mess. "You did this," she continued, voice rising to a hysterical pitch. "You and that stupid video, you ruined our lives. And now you just stand there looking smug while we rot away on the streets?" A small part of me, the scared, insecure girl who had once cowered at their very presence, felt a fleeting twinge of pity. But the stronger woman I'd become quickly stamped it out. "I'm not helping you," I said coldly, pulling out my phone. "In fact, if you don't leave right now, I'm calling the cops." Her face contorted in rage, and she opened her mouth to unleash another unhinged tirade. But with a few deft taps, I had pulled up the video from the mall, that haunting audio of their vicious insults filling the room. Lindsay froze, eyes widening in horror as the reality of her situation crashing down. "One more word, and I blast this baby out to every media outlet," I warned, finger hovering over the share button. "So I'd start walking if I were you." For a moment, it looked like she might actually lunge at me in a fit of desperation, but then her shoulders slumped in defeat, and she simply turned and trudged away, just another broken soul left in my wake. It was finally over. I had won, or so I thought. As the weeks passed, Todd and Lindsay's pathetic pleas for help didn't let up. My phone was bombarded with increasingly frantic texts and voicemails, begging me to take pity on them before things spiraled even further out of control. "Marie, please, I'm desperate here. Todd's gruff voice crackled over the latest message. I'll do anything, anything at all. Just help me get back on my feet so I can start over. I snorted derisively as I deleted it without a second thought. Fat chance of that happening after the stunt he pulled at my office. But cruel as it may sound, a small part of me relished watching their self-destruction play out. Every gnawing text, every groveling call, it all reinforced just how far the once smug, superior Todd had fallen. Until one day, an unexpected visitor showed up on my doorstep, snapping me back to reality in a chilling way. It was a dreary Saturday afternoon, and Liam had gone to a coding camp on campus for the day. Ryan and I were just settling in for a lazy Netflix binge when the harsh rattle of the doorbell shattered the peaceful quiet. I frowned, glancing at Ryan, who simply shrugged. We weren't expecting anyone. Cautiously, I made my way over and peered through the peephole, and immediately regretted it. There on my front porch stood Todd and Lindsay, looking more ragged and hopeless than I could have ever imagined. Lindsay's eyes were sunken and hollow, her greasy hair hanging in matted tangles, and Todd, his gaunt, sallow face and overgrown stubble made him practically unrecognizable. "What do you want?" I snapped, squaring my shoulders as I cracked open the door a few inches, the chain lock still engaged. "Please," Todd croaked, voice little more than a broken rasp. "You have to help us." "We're destitute, Marie," Lindsay added with a haunted look. "Homeless, penniless, living on the damn streets like animals." I bit back the acidic retort that immediately sprang to mind. Getting ensnared in their toxic sludge of self-pity was the last thing I wanted. But still, the sight of two grown adults hitting literal rock bottom, well, it was hard to witness, even for my worst enemies. "Look," I said, careful to keep my tone detached and even. "I'm sorry you've fallen on such hard times. But what did you honestly expect after that disgusting display at the mall? Those were the consequences of your own reprehensible actions." Todd opened his mouth, no doubt to try and appeal to whatever tattered shred of sympathy I might possess, but I didn't give him the chance. "And don't bother with the sad puppy dog act," I continued, unable to resist twisting the knife. "We both know the only reason you came crawling back is because you need someone to bail you out. Again." The slump of his shoulders, the glassy look in Lindsay's eyes told me I'd struck a nerve. Good. Maybe a cold, hard dose of reality was what they needed to snap out of their toxic cycle. "I'll help you find a decent homeless shelter, get you set up with job counseling resources, that kind of thing," I offered, knowing full well they'd refuse. "But that's as far as I'm willing to go, because frankly, you don't deserve a damn thing from me." Todd recoiled like I'd slapped him across the face, anger flaring in his sunken eyes, but Lindsay simply pulled him away with a defeated nod. As they retreated from my porch, I felt an unexpected pang of sadness for the broken strangers they had become, but it was quickly overshadowed by a fierce sense of vindication. Not so long ago, they had taken such glee in trying to break me, to strip me of every ounce of dignity and self-worth, and now the tables had turned in the most brutal of ways. This was justice, pure and simple. This was my long-awaited revenge, finally complete. The weeks after Todd and Lindsay's pathetic porch visit were some of the most peaceful of my life. No more unhinged voicemails or deranged text tirades, just blessed silence. They had finally gotten the message and slunk away to whatever rock they had crawled out from under. Not that I spent too much time dwelling on their misfortunes. I was too busy basking in the warm glow of my own blessings. Like watching Liam receive his admissions letter to MIT, that elated grin stretching from ear to ear as he clutched the life-changing envelope. All the endless hours of coding and tinkering, the sleepless nights spent obsessively debugging apps and programs, it had all paid off in the biggest way possible. "I got in! Can you believe it?" he shouted, pulling me into a fierce bear hug that damn near cracked my ribs. In that moment, I was happier for him than I could ever put into words. Ryan and I threw him a raucous celebratory dinner, inviting over his girlfriend Jess and her parents, along with Ryan's mom and dad. An exhilarating buzz of joy and pride seemed to crackle through the air as we all drank too much wine and recounted embarrassing childhood stories, reveling in Liam's monumental achievement. While he blushed furiously at my recollections of just how obsessed he was with building Legos as a kid, Ryan's mom leaned over and gave my hand a fond squeeze. "You've raised one hell of a fine young man, Marie," she said with a watery smile. "We're all so proud of him. And of you." As I glanced around at the faces of my loved ones, seeing the unabashed adoration and support radiating from every smile, every warm embrace, I felt something loosen in my chest, a persistent little knot of pain and resentment that had been carried over from my old life finally unfurling. This was everything Todd could never understand, I realized. This profound sense of love and belonging, of finding your tribe and being celebrated for exactly who you are. No amount of money or status could ever replicate the profound peace it brought. In the days after the dinner, Ryan and I settled into a new groove, splitting our time between planning an epic graduation party for Liam and starting to transform his old bedroom into a cozy home office for me. With him shipping off to Boston in just a few short months, we wanted to savor every remaining moment as a family. One evening, as I was elbow-deep in taping off the trim in preparation for painting, my phone buzzed with an alert. Snapping off my latex gloves, I glanced down at the screen, some long-forgotten muscle memory, bracing for another verbal assault from my tormentors. But it wasn't Lindsay's number glaring back at me, nor Todd's. It was an unknown caller I didn't recognize. "Hello?" I answered cautiously. There was a beat of silence, then a weary sigh. "Hey, Marie. It's me. Well, it's Todd." I recoiled instinctively, a decade's worth of trauma and hurt rushing back in an instant. What fresh hell was this jackass trying to drag me through now? "Before you hang up, just hear me out," he continued, voice sounding smaller and more pathetic than I could have imagined. I just wanted to apologize for everything." The words hung there, painfully sincere despite their utter inadequacy, as if a few measly "I'm sorries" could even begin to make amends for the mental anguish he'd inflicted over the years. "You don't get to do that," I shot back acidly. "Not after all the stunts you pulled, showing up on my doorstep groveling for help like a sad, broken loser." Another heavy sigh crackled over the line. "You're right. I don't deserve anything from you. I was a mean, arrogant prick who didn't appreciate how good I had it." I opened my mouth to protest, to hurl back every seething insult I'd been stockpiling for the better part of 2 decades. But some deeper instinct gave me pause. This wasn't the same sneering superior Todd I remembered. This was a ghost of that man, stripped down to his barest, most vulnerable core, and somehow that made his words ring with painful sincerity. "You've made an incredible life for yourself, Marie," he continued softly. "Despite everything I put you through, you came out stronger on the other side. You've got an amazing family, people who really love and appreciate you." His voice began to waver with what sounded like barely restrained emotion. "And me? After losing it all, I've got no one. Just a pathetic loner who fucked up something beautiful because I was too selfish and cruel to see it at the time." I swallowed hard, the simmering rage that had fueled me for so long slowly dissipating in the wake of Todd's harrowing confession. Hearing him like this, burnt down to the thinnest whisper of his former self, it stirred up an emotion I never could have anticipated. Pity. I opened my mouth to respond, but the line had already gone dead. Just like that, my last lingering tie to the past had been severed. The book closed on that painful chapter of my life once and for all. Turning back to the half-prepped room, I couldn't hold back the contented smile that tugged at my lips. With Todd's sins finally laid to rest, I felt lighter than I had in years, like a massive weight had been lifted from my shoulders. It was a strange kind of closure, but one I'd embrace wholeheartedly. A new beginning was calling, and this time I vowed to face it with nothing but peace, love, and light in my heart.